All right, we're back with another absolute state of things. Eventful week with my boy Hominis here. Hey, Hominis, how's it going?
Not too bad, man. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm pretty much like 95% over the whole COVID thing, and it wasn't too bad. Like for the most part, just a little like light congestion. Kind of feel like you're hawking up phlegm a little bit, and that was pretty much the only symptom I had besides a fever the first like 4 days, but that wore off, and yeah, all that was left was just kind of like me having phlegm in my throat, wanting to cough it up constantly. So yeah, pretty easy time for national lockdown inducing pandemic. How was your weekend? Oh shit. Yellow. There you go.
There we go. I dropped for some reason. I don't know what the hell happened.
Oh, that's weird. What was the last thing you... Oh, I was just talking about, yeah, the fact that it was a pretty light sickness. COVID.
You're not dead? I would have thought, man. I mean...
Yeah, we did have, fucking business-ending lockdowns all across the country. And, well, not even the country, the world. I know the earlier variants were supposedly, like, much more fucking powerful, which does make sense, but yeah, now at this point it's like I don't understand why anybody still wears a mask or does fucking anything if this is all that happens to you.
Still waiting on the severe winter of what is it? The winter of severe illness and death. Maybe we'll get that this time. I don't know. We'll see. We never got right-wing death squad, so I feel like I'm kind of owed this one.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is that like the sheer consistency of all of these doom predictions being wrong, and like you could use like graphs and data in real time. Like you could be like, okay, you say masks work, well, let's look at mask compliance, associate that with results, and to see if it makes a difference in results, and it fucking don't. And you can compare the same region over time. You can compare multiple regions over the same period of time. You can do all sorts of things, and can't link these measures, the lockdown measures, the masking measures, any of that shit to better outcomes. And so it's like maybe better to focus on the whole medicine aspect of it. And
did you see they added ivermectin?
That's exactly what I was gonna say, that we I should have looked up the article or whatever. And now it's under the listed like antivirals. It's still not, I think, under their like recommended treatments or whatever, but it's still recognized as an antiviral option, which it's horse medicine though. It's horse paste. How dare you suggest that you take horse paste to get better? And yeah,
we're just following the science, even though it keeps fucking changing into everything that we say is true. You think they get one right eventually? I don't know, man. Like, At least when I'm a fucking doomer, it comes true.
And
Unfortunately.
it's wild to me because it's like these things are just obvious if you kind of just think about them for a bit. Like as long as you just don't assume everybody's telling you the complete truth. If you're just like, okay, maybe there's some agendas. Maybe people are human, and their human impulses lead them into telling us certain things, telling us that they're true. Like people can lie every once in a while if it serves their purposes. It's possible. They're like, no, these are just experts. Yeah.
Listen, scientists have never been motivated by politics or money. Never, never, never. It's never happened.
So yeah, it's just
certainly it wouldn't be the same people rolling out the vaccines who were motivated by politics and money before, paid the largest criminal fine in history for being motivated by politics and money.
Pay no attention to the insider trading going on while these measures are being introduced.
Yeah, that was my favorite thing is Joe Biden shouting that we beat pharma. It's like, how did you beat them? They had
I heard about that.
Fucking best. They had like their best 2 years in forever. Like, what do you mean you beat pharma?
And
okay.
So now we get him on record saying that vaccines are, maybe a little bit iffy and we shouldn't trust them so much. No, I mean, I'm sure he's still he'll push the next booster. They just approved another booster, I think a couple days ago for the fall.
We're gonna boost.
Yeah, whenever, now that I'm going back to work and stuff, and people are asking me how COVID was and all that stuff, and then sometimes like people will then be like, oh, so you got the vaccine and stuff and all that, and now my go-to response is no, I'm a pure blood, okay? And
I mean, really,
hey man, this, in like 5 years, 10 years, like that's gonna be a condition in like blood and semen donation places and shit, like plasma, right? It's like
looking forward.
Have you got no vaccines? Are you a pure blood? Like, yeah, you need them that pure blood sperm. I got you.
Yeah.
The long game. I got it. It's an investment. Also, just like pulling the gun because, like in my region, like getting a vaccine is just seen as like ubiquitous and the standard thing to do. I remember at work there was only one other person who was like adamantly anti-vaccine, and she's another like vegan chick, but she's like one of them like conspiracy theorist vegan chicks who was like, like pharma's out to get us and shit, which is like true and right, and that's why I totally love like sharing like vaccine news with her and stuff. But then she went on to our other restaurant in Long Beach, and so yeah, she don't work there anymore. So I'm like the only person who's like adamantly anti-vax. I mean, we don't really talk about it anymore. It's not really a subject that comes up, but like at the time when like the first and second like vaccine were rolling out and stuff, he would talk about going to get them and stuff. So I was like, nah. And
don't want to go get vaccinated as a group, like a cool fun activity. They could try to market it like that, and it was weird.
That's bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like a huge thing, but there was a couple times around here that people were like having events for people to go get vaccinated, and I'm like, this seems
like
weird.
Our owner was trying to see if he could like use a loophole because they have a business in Long Beach too, and Long Beach County had this like vaccine program that people could take advantage of that are like you could do through your work and stuff. So he was trying to see if like people in our store was interested in maybe like being claimed as employees from Long Beach and going to get the vaccine and stuff. I was just like, nah, I don't really feel like it. And he kept on like try to push me. I was like explain like why exactly, and I wasn't just gonna be like, because they're trying to get us, man. Try to kill us and give us heart attacks and shit. I was just like, I'm not gonna have this fucking fight with my owner and everything. But he didn't really push it too far. So, but that was the only real, like, I don't know, group activity sort of like pushing of it. He was just trying to see if I was interested in getting looped in this like law that applies in Long Beach. And I never really came up again after that.
It's good.
But yeah, so they were like trying to get you guys to go as a group or some shit, or?
No, it wasn't through work or anything. It was just
Oh,
like I mean, your usual uh advocacy groups or whatever. They'll try to start like these little like stupid
vaccine events.
activist events to get people to go
Gotcha.
fucking get vaccinated and hang out and listen to live music, get a vaccine. I'm like, this is no. What the fuck? Why do you have to
The
bribe
vaccine
people to do
festival.
it? Yeah, right. It's a Burning Man for vaccines instead of getting heroin addiction and STD. You just go get vaccinated in a tent.
That's amazing.
Like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going back to the gym tomorrow. I think it was the first day I'm gonna go back. Pretty much feeling better. I got like the tiniest bit of congestion. It's pretty much fucking gone. So yeah, I'm gonna go to the gym tomorrow and see if I haven't lost all my climbing strength. I can still do pull-ups because I got my pull-up bar here, and so I just do sets of those throughout the days, and hopefully I can keep a little bit of my arm strength and my climbing strength. Because yeah, now it's been 3 weeks I think since I've gone. Because I hadn't gone for like a week, and then I got COVID, so I didn't go for the past 2 weeks as well. So yeah, just doing home workouts. Go back to the gym.
Yeah,
I still
because
remember how to climb.
I can imagine you wouldn't want to. You wouldn't really want to. I mean, it's physically it does take a little bit of a toll on you. I remember when I got it, and I got like the shitty kind, and like I felt like somebody had worked my body over with a baseball bat for a week, and that sucked. But then you get better. But even still, like apparently you still get the body aches and shit with this one. It just goes away a lot faster, and yeah, you feel weak.
Oh yeah, the first couple days I just physically not because I had like chills and body aches, and I had fine, but the rest of it was just I got like, well, it does affect kind of like your breathing in your throat, and
Also, like the
last
not the lack of appetite. I mean, you're not putting any food in your body. You're not gonna have any energy for climbing a wall.
Yeah. So yeah,
I had it.
Go back tomorrow and see if I still got it.
Nice. Well, take it easy. Start small. Might have to work your way back up to it.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna try to do some easy climbs, and pushing myself, muscle memory and the strength up. But yeah, anyway, off to our first subject is we got the Queen of England died. What was it?
We got her.
8th? I think it was the 8th that it happened, right?
I believe
8th or 9th?
Tuesday or Wednesday. Do.
8th, yeah.
Yeah, it was the 8th. You're right. You looked it up faster than I did.
Yeah,
man.
And it was, I mean, Tumblr's been waiting for it for a little while now. We've all been kind of like, waiting with bated breath, like, oh, hospital, maybe.
There's one thing that could bring everybody together on that website. It's hating the fucking Queen of England.
Yeah, and yeah, that one account that was just, did the Queen of England die today? It was just every single day up to this point was no, and then like a bunch of meme explosions, and yes, it happened.
Yes. Yeah, no, I imagine the whole fucking country of Ireland is probably losing their minds, which good for them.
Yeah, like they should have a nice treat like this. It's
At least once.
yeah, at least once. Charles ain't got that long to go either, so we'll probably have another.
Oh no, that goofy motherfucker's gone in my lifetime easily.
And yeah,
Which
and
is
so
cool. I'll be able to say I saw the death of 2 separate shitty monarchs, so that's cool.
Yeah, and so the reason why we just think this is great and think this is sort of something to celebrate and mock and make fun of is, well, look, they're monarchs. Well, one, it's a simple thing. Is just like, look, a politician dies, a head of state dies. It seems like a good enough day for us. And really, like, I don't know, people try to connect her to all sorts of stuff like imperialism and stuff, but it's true, right? Yeah, sure, the British monarchy, they were involved in a lot of colonizing in Africa and, well, in a lot of the world, but like especially still more recently, at least within her lifetime, it's like Africa and what was it, and just overseeing the troubles in Ireland and trying to violently suppress that, and profiting off of just leeching off of the country in general, because I mean none of their money is really earned. It's just and that's in a lot of the artifacts and, you know, treasures that they have in Buckingham Palace and all that were from being taken from other places by force. And so, you know, this is a person who sits on a big fucking pile of wealth that, unlike, you know, in the private sector, that it could be said to be earned off of voluntary exchange, has been earned through, you know, forcible taking and living off of taxpayer dime, and expecting people to, you know, pay for their extravagances and their events and their weddings and all this other bullshit. And
even the dead, man, the old bitch is dead, and they're having what, 40 days of mourning. Like, I think the last time a royal family member died, it cost $12 million. Like, can you imagine how much this is going to cost these people?
Yeah, and exactly. So it's a family of leeches. It's the whole concept of the monarchy and the royal family is just a bunch of people who would like to leech off of others for their well-being, just through the happenstance of birth.
Well, yeah, just the idea of monarchy kind of it should be offensive to anyone who believes in human rights and equality in the first place, because it just implies that some people are better than others, like just by circumstance of birth and the fact that their family had a shitload of money, and so now they deserve to just keep ruling the country forever, their whole family, over generations.
Yeah, and importantly, better without any metric, right? Just like better in the abstract, right? If you're trying to compare people based on a metric of better or worse, you know, at tennis or, you know, something, then we could talk about better or worse. But just better as, you know, as a benefit of your existence within a certain line versus another, you know, it's incredibly unearned. And speaking of being born into
extremely unearned
into certain bloodlines and certain relations, you know, we could talk about the queen and her husband and the fact that they're related. They're third cousins. And so this was a post that was going around Tumblr for a bit, and I couldn't find the actual one because they also had a different family tree that explained Prince Albert and Queen Victoria up there at the top of that tree are also first cousins, which would, I think the claim was that that would make her and her mother third cousins once removed, something like that. I don't remember exactly how the that bit figures out, so I could like look. Basically, they share the same great grandmother. Well, Queen Victoria's mother shared the same great grandmother with herself, and since she's, what is it, fucking cousins with, you know, married her cousin, therefore it would make, yeah, their third cousins once removed, as well as first cousins with Prince Albert. But anyway, there's like three fucking circles weird in that family tree. My point is that there's
so fucking weird.
Yeah, I do know. It just
keeps going around and around and around. It's gross.
Yeah, so Prince Albert and Queen Victoria up at the top definitely had the same grandmother.
But that's what happens with these monarchies, and then, like, you know, you get down the line, and some of them are so incredibly like inbred that they are all like twisted up and freakish because, you know, they have all these genetic defects from just being inbred. And it's like, and this is just like a normal part of monarchy, because you can't marry outside royalty, so you just marry within your own family over and over and over again.
Yeah, and so the way that we track this is basically that Prince Albert and Queen Victoria, they had a son that became King Edward, and King Edward had a son who became King George V, and George V had a son named who was King George VI, who was Queen Elizabeth's father, and so that's how she was in line for the throne. But they also had a daughter. Well, they had several daughters, but their third daughter, Alice, married. I don't know who Louis IV, what country Louis IV was from, but Louis IV. And so they had a daughter who was known as Princess Victoria, and Princess Victoria, her daughter was Princess Alice, who then was Prince Philip's mother. And so basically the familial or the maternal line of Prince Philip is connected to Queen Victoria, as is the paternal line through the males, the male heirs in the family, going down to Queen Elizabeth, which is how they are third cousins.
Yeah, that's rough, buddy. Ooh, yeah, I mean, if you look at your family, and obviously they have access to this, because this is like, how they track this kind of shit. Like, you look at your own family tree and just see two big fucking circles. I don't know.
Yeah, it's actually kind of difficult also to get. Like, when I was trying to look this up and find the family trees again, it was actually a little bit difficult because most of the family trees tend to either start with Queen Elizabeth and explain her kids and like the currently existing family line, or if they connect to, like, if they're talking about Queen Victoria's ancestors, then they don't also connect Philip's ancestry as well. And like it's Philip is there, and then it doesn't show his parents and their connections, and it just shows Queen Victoria's or Queen Elizabeth's line and her parentage. So that's it was a little bit just gotta dig around a tad in order to find
A little bit.
this one again. And I tried looking it up on Tumblr, but I couldn't find that original one. And this was just an article that, like, in all this, they talk about royal inbreeding in general, but they do actually mention that, Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert, are first cousins. And Queen Victoria had hemophilia, which I don't know. The blood disease?
Hemophilia is you have it's a clotting disease, so your blood doesn't clot. You, even for like small cuts and stuff. Actually, I have a buddy of mine I used to work with.
Right, and then so you're in danger of like bleeding out more drastically.
Yeah, especially for like serious injuries and stuff. It's like actually it becomes like a legitimate problem, even if it's not like a huge cut. If it's bad enough that it keeps bleeding for a long period of time, they have to like give you clotting factor and all that shit to get your blood to clot up so that you don't like die.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so I guess Queen Victoria had that and passed it on to a lot of the royal, families across Europe that she was connected to. In other news, we have credit card companies who are now going to be tracking, categorizing gun sales on behalf of the federal government.
Yep. Well, they're going to be categorizing it, and again, it's like if they can categorize it based on that, then anybody can look at those sales records and track it. Just because, and this is definitely from pressure from groups like Bloomberg and shit like that have been pushing this kind of thing for a long time. Because if they can't get something passed democratically, then they're just going to co-opt the corporations to do it instead, and everybody knows that the banks are basically just another arm of the government at this point.
everything within the state and nothing outside of the state.
Yeah, where does that? Who said that?
Some Italian guy. Don't worry about it.
Just some Italian guy. No big deal. Yeah. So this is really interesting. I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about it. I mean, not outside our small little group that I kind of get around with on Tumblr, obviously. But a lot of people don't think it's a huge deal yet. But it's like, you've already got what, red flag laws, and stuff like that.
It's just it's another branch or another like rung in the ladder of this totalitarian control state that people want to enact, and it's done ever so gradually and in ways that, in the least intrusive ways possible, to make people write it off as just these conspiracy theories and as this sort of
like
paranoid thinking, right? And just they're like, this has been going on since the Patriot Act and all this other stuff, where it's just like, listen, you guys, this is very, very serious. Like, the Patriot Act isn't just some shitty thing the government did, and then that's the end of it. It was like, no, this is a fundamental erosion of what it means to be secure in your own person. This is something that everybody should, like, hang people over, and they're just passing it in front of you in fucking Congress. As
I mean, if we're being honest, this is like the fifth thing, maybe. Well, I'm probably actually underestimating. This is like the fifth thing this year that people should be hung over. I mean, for fuck's sake, like, I know it's a really tired reference, but I mean, we started a whole fucking revolutionary war over what was the tax? I can't even remember what it was. It was small though, compared to 30% of your paycheck today.
Yeah, it was something like some sort of like 3% tax on tea.
It was like 3%, and we started an entire goddamn revolutionary war over it. Over 3%, because people understood that, like, this is my money. You have no business even taking it in the first place. Like,
and just the fact that it was imposed, right, without any recourse for changing it or anything like that. And meanwhile, you have these, perpetual wars on terror. You have the erosion of our money supply. Like, all these things are taxes on us without representation, and especially
happening without our input. Yeah.
And especially these, like, Patriot Act restrictions and expansions of government. Like, the people who passed this stuff didn't even read what was in it, and everybody, this was like an open secret at the time that, some decent reporters went out and investigated. They're like, hey, you guys read this huge bill before you passed it? Because you didn't really have a lot of time to do it, and it's a huge document. So it seems very unlikely that you did. But, did you? And they're like, no, of course we fucking didn't. What are you, crazy? How are we just going to read a bill before we pass it? Like, they acted like you were the crazy one for expecting them to
it takes too long for us to read it. There's too much stuff in here. And I'm like, well, then maybe there's a fucking problem. If it's only supposed to do one thing, why is it so goddamn big?
It's like, well, why are you making it into law? You're voting to approve it.
If you haven't read it, yeah.
And it was like they acted like you were the fucking ridiculous one for expecting them to be knowledgeable about their job. It's just like, no, this is this is why people don't fucking trust.
They make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Yes. Yeah. Again, paid off of our dime. They're leeches just the same as the monarchy, and it's like, you make money off of us to do certain things, and you don't even do the bare fucking minimum of that thing. And this is what we can say, like, okay, you can have your fancy ass constitution and your checks and balances and all that other shit, but at the end of the day, the people who are being put into office are people. They're humans with their own agendas and their own desires, and reading a bill before passing it, as long as it's politically expedient, it's just not it's not on their agenda. It's not on their priority. So why the fuck would they do it?
And yeah, I mean, like clearly there's a way around these checks and balances. It's like, how do you think they've been getting away with it for so long?
It's because
Like,
there are people, right? They're people, and they just choose to ignore it. They're just like, fucking okay, whatever. I don't really give a shit about that.
it's like,
We're
you
just
know,
gonna create a new normal.
check and balance. Yeah, I mean, a check and balance is just a barrier, right? It's just like a wall, or like not even a very high wall. It's a pretty low wall. Let's be honest. I mean, if you can set a boundary, and you set it to somebody who's working within the system, they can build any kind of workaround that they want around it because they're working within the system. They know how. They're the inside man. They're their own inside man. They can just build a fucking workaround right around it, you know.
Well,
So the
yeah,
checks
because
and balances
any
don't function.
politician, all they have to do in order to really, get something passed, like let's say constitutional limitations, is just to convince enough of their coworkers that it's something that could benefit them too. And then boom, you have it passed because you just explain it like, look, so I'm going to use this now, but then we can all kind of use it in a little bit later, in our own, various selfish ways. And then everybody else is like, oh, we got a little bit more power now. If we give him power, then we have more power. And I like having more power, so let's just fucking do it. And
That's
easy.
how democracy works, right? You
It's an
convince
easy
enough
fucking
people and-
game. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
So, yeah, the fact that there's now this collusion with credit card companies is, especially when we have the revolving door of like lobbyists and politicians, where you have like a lot of these politicians who used to be on corporate boards, like in Pfizer and in gun manufacturers. Obviously, fucking, I think, was it Donald Rumsfeld worked for Halliburton, I want to say, or was it Dick Cheney? Somebody during the Bush years had come from Halliburton. I forget who it was, but I mean, there's dozens of examples of this sort of thing happening in various different fields. Like I said, in weapons manufacturing, and in the pharmaceutical industry, in the banking industry for sure. Oh man, the amount of like banking corporate executives that have gone on to work in government and then go back to their corporate jobs, like taking like speaking gigs and shit like that. It's just fucking talk about inbreeding. That's our next new upgraded fucking modern inbreeding is democratic inbreeding, and it's just as much of a fucking problem as it's more so of a problem than the fucking royal inbreeding is just this bullshit ass kind of like, oh, look at these fucking degenerates. But like corporate inbreeding with the fucking government, this fascist inbreeding, is actually just dangerous to us all.
It's extremely, yeah. I mean, they're just feeding each other, and I don't get where this semblance of control that people think exists, or like how they think they're gonna turn. Like I even just getting, oh, we're gonna get we just gotta get the right people in, and it's like, no, you'll never get the right people in. You don't even know who the right people are. Like, I hate to say it, but how many times have we get this guy in and it's gonna fix things, and then he turns out to be a fucking scumbag? People swore up and down that Mitt Romney was gonna save the Republican Party. Well, we all know how that went, and plus he's fucking Mitt Romney. Like, okay.
Yeah, it's
like that dude might as well be a Democrat all by himself.
Well, there's just innumerable examples, really, of all this. Like, and Bush, a prime example of somebody who's like how short people's memories are about.
So short. They hated him back when we were doing Iraq War and everything was a big deal, and now he's like hugging the Obamas,
And this is actually, we're gonna talk about 9/11 in a little bit. I have a couple of I wanted to rewatch the Scott Horton fucking episode of that, like section from his video series on just 9/11 and Afghanistan. But like, this is the true like lessons that we should have learned from 9/11 is how our government got us into the mess and how our government exploited that mess. And how angry we should be at the fucking scumbags who helped us along, including Joe Biden and George W. Bush. We used to fucking hate these guys. There was so many protests from like leftists and all this kind of shit, with fucking Bush with a Hitler mustache, or like, you know, signs that say Bush is Hitler and all this shit. And then it just pisses me off how much after Obama came, then people are like, well, you know, the wars, I don't know, maybe they're not so bad, or at least we shouldn't protest them, or, you know, give anybody shit about them. And then like the Bush got some fucking photo ops with like Michelle Obama and like Barack Obama and shit. And then people were like, I guess he's kind of always kind of a little cool. He's all right, like a kind of a, you know, funky grandpa or some shit. And, you know, he paints as well. You know, he paints pictures of little dogs and shit. So isn't he cool? And like, well, no, he's not. Remember war, like people dying, lying to us about weapons of mass destruction. You know, the fucking Abu Ghraib, torture. None of this.
It went on for years through multiple presidencies. How do people forget about this shit so fast?
And then now we have, like we looked at the other week, the fucking George W. Bush teaching a masterclass on decisive leadership, as if this is the like, as if that's not a giant fucking joke. That seems to be like something that would have been in like a fucking Family Guy bit, or, you know, like in some like an SNL parody, right? Like, you know, where they would do like a bit of like a masterclass commercial, and, you know, it would be George W. Bush, and he's like, well, that day when I, you know, ignored all the warnings about possible blowback from Osama bin Laden, because he was giving speeches, you know, talking to reporters and shit, saying that he was going to do this and why he was going to do it and what his plan was to get us into perpetual warfare. Like he definitely openly talked about this, and then, you know, he just escaped out of Afghanistan into Pakistan at December of 2001, even though there's a bunch of fucking you know, commanders of special forces divisions and shit going, we know where he is, we know what he's trying to do, we just need enough men to go and take him and make sure that it's done safely. And, you know, the White House was like, nah, we don't want to do that, and they just sat on their fucking thumbs and let him get into Pakistan. And then when he was in Pakistan, they're not like, okay, well, we'll just cross the border into Pakistan and go fucking get him. They're just like, no, he's now safe. That's like, it's like tag where he's safe and we can't go fucking do it. And it's just like, what the fuck? This has got to be a fucking joke. Like the most wanted man in the fucking world, and now he's in safe. He's in Pakistan. You can't tag him anymore. Like, come on. And this motherfucker's teaching classes on decisive leadership. Like, that just sounds like a joke.
It's an Onion article. Like, it's what it is. It's a fucking Babylon Bee article.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you could pull off on Babylon, and I would be like, ha ha ha, funny. George W. Bush, decisive leadership. That's exactly the opposite. That's so funny. That's a great joke. That's perfectly designed joke where like the punchline like explains itself over and over again in many different ways. And so anyway, yeah, the point is, this is the lessons that we should have about 9/11, and we'll get into the lessons that people actually know about 9/11 in a bit. Before we do more COVID news, I found an interesting article, or like an interesting, well, originally I didn't find the article, I saw a video on it, but now, anyway, point is, article, so it says, I'm a doctor, here's why my kids won't wear masks this school year. And okay, that's pretty cool. Doctor writes an article about, you know, why their kids won't be wearing masks, maybe why they think from their professional opinion masks are not appropriate for kids. That seems, you know, pretty positive and stuff. But then you look at who wrote the article, and this lady, Leanna S. Wen, you may recognize. I know it's a little small, the photo, but she's that Asian doctor who was put on CNN a lot during the initial stages of the lockdown.
Bitch, yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know
where
exactly who you're talking about.
she was praising like she was so pro lockdown and so like, listen, you can't question this shit. And then when the vaccine came out, she went on CNN talking about like, oh, we should use freedom as like a carrot like reward for people to incentivize people to get the vaccine, and obviously we withhold it from people who don't get the vaccine, and their freedom should be continue to be restricted and stuff. And the past couple months, she's kind of done a bunch of 180s. She came out with an article a little while back, like maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, that was saying something like, yeah, now we have to kind of gauge, at this point in the pandemic, we have to kind of have to gauge how much intrusion we're really willing to, deal with to like circumvent our normal lives, and how much like that's worth it compared to preventing ourselves from getting COVID. And like more soberly talking about how like risks and benefits should be weighed, and that maybe sometimes just going back to a semi-normal life is okay because it's worth it for the added risk of COVID, given the stage in the pandemic and all that. And so now she's coming out with this article that's talking about why her kids aren't wearing masks in school. So yeah, as soon as you like remember the CNN and her appearances on that shit, it's just like, yo, serious right now?
That's fucking nuts. That's fucking nuts. And like, what I don't get is there's still people who, well, there's probably a lot of them that just don't fucking know that like stuff like this has happened. But like the CDC rolls all of this shit back, and instead of taking a second to go, wait a minute, now the CDC's rolling all this shit back, and like all this stuff is just kind of falling apart. Like, does that mean that it was all bullshit? No. They go the opposite fucking direction with it, and they just double down even harder. They double down even fucking harder. Well, they would know because they're the experts, so now the time is right. The science has changed.
Yeah, and so she talks about how she was pretty cautious at the very beginning, that and then when the vaccines came out, that people could relax their precautions based off of their risk tolerance, but that she was still pretty cautious because she's got unvaccinated kids, and avoided indoor restaurants and indoor gatherings unless they had proof of vaccination and recent negative tests, and yeah, supported initially masking kids in schools and doing only outdoor play dates. So she was very cautious as it was, just fucking shoveling down the kind of mainstream restrictions without critically thinking about them. And then when Omicron came out, she basically realized that like everybody was getting infected, and that her idea of like using lockdowns and restrictions to contain COVID was just not realistic, and that it was just something like the flu and everything that we just will need to understand is going to be ubiquitous and around.
Yeah, it's gonna be around forever. Like it's made the jump to human transmission. It's the flu now. It's over. It's gonna be around forever. People just need to get used to it.
Yeah, it was always wild to me that people would think that you could wrangle in a virus as easily transmissible as this. It was like I had always assumed that I would be getting COVID at any point when when the pandemic first arrived. I was like, okay, some of us are gonna get COVID, and we'll just have to go through it and get it, and there's a degree of immunity that comes with that. Now with the variants, you can still get it multiple times, but the subsequent time you have immunity against the more stronger strains if you had it early on. So it's not really that much of a risk if the subsequent strains, even if you don't have immunity, they're still going to be the weaker variants and strains or whatever. So fuck it, you get a little bit of congestion for a couple weeks, and then you go back to work.
That's what happened to the vast majority of people. Like, yeah, a lot of people died, but a lot of people that did die, again, had like multiple comorbidities. And I'm sorry, but like the people that got hit the worst were people that were already had heart problems or had lung problems or extremely old or were extremely obese. Like, this is stuff that happens with the flu. It happens with a lot of diseases because it's already a strain on your body, and your your just like your systems, and then you get sick again on top of that, and you're not able to fight it off as effectively as everybody else. It happens, you know.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't justify a this 2 year authoritarian expansion and lockdown and destruction of the economy at all.
Yeah, and then especially these fucking pork barrel stimulus packages that have, a bunch of earmarks for other shit that has nothing to do with COVID, and that just further devalues our money supply and fucks us over, right? It's just like a huge slap in the face that, you're going through this supposed like deadly and emergency pandemic, and then you just like sneak in a bunch of money to your pet projects and shit. It's like, fucking really? This is what you're concerned with if we're supposedly in this emergency situation?
Did they not also give themselves a raise? I remember them giving themselves a raise.
Yeah, that also happened. And so yeah, this lady goes on to talk about how she vaccinated her kids, fully vaccinated her kids, including the 2-year-old that was born in 2020. But overall, she accepts that her kids will probably get COVID at some point, just as they could the flu or any other respiratory virus or contagious disease that happens to fucking come into school near you. And
they'll be fine.
And yeah, it'll almost certainly be mild. And it comments on the fact that her masking has harmed her son's language development and limited both kids' extracurricular social interactions in a negative way.
Imagine that.
And so, yeah, it's just like, we and this is what we said initially with the masks and shit being popular, was that like people aren't really meant to interact with each other by covering their faces. Like our faces are very important for gauging social interaction and being able to do that comfortably, because this just, our face is part of communicating and
how we communicate. Yeah.
And it's just natural for us and strange for us if we don't have that. And
Wild.
Who to thunk it, if you do this to children, then, and you don't allow them to explore the facets of facial interaction when they're developing their language skills and when they're developing their ability to communicate with one another, like it could be negative for that. Amazing. Like
wild.
It's just like, I don't need to be a fucking doctor who goes on CNN to be able to figure this shit out, and you're called a conspiracy theorist.
This is stuff that if you said it like initially when all this was happening, you were a conspiracy theorist, you would get deplatformed, you would get shouted down, and now it's just a normal thing that you can say as long as you're an expert, and everybody's okay with it.
Yeah, and so of course she had to end it though by saying, like, listen, we're not anti-mask though, and we're not going to stigmatize anybody for choosing to wear masks, and we're not COVID minimizers. I have articles where I talk about how bad COVID is and how dangerous it is to us. So don't think that I'm not going to take this seriously, but still, the admission that it's like, look, the mask fucked up our kids' ability to communicate clearly and effectively with their peers.
But God forbid she get labeled a minimizer. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. Now she gotta make sure that she's still part of the crowd. She still agrees with the message.
Paying fucking lip service to the message. Yeah.
Yeah, and in other news, we have Biden being sued by two attorney generals. It was Missouri and Louisiana attorney generals over their collusion with big tech over suppressing the election year stories that could have harmed their chances in the elections.
Really now? Now that I did not hear about. This is news to me. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so two Republican-led states have reportedly filed a lawsuit against Joe Biden and other top administration officials, alleging that they pressured, quote, pressure included, unquote, with big tech companies to squash the Post's Hunter Biden laptop story and censor information related to the COVID-19's lab origins. The lawsuit filed Thursday by the Missouri and Louisiana attorney generals accuses top government officials of conspiring to suppress information with local media, social media giants Meta, Twitter, and YouTube, quote, under the guise of combating misinformation, end quote. Fox News reported. And so, yeah, people who are accused include Jen Psaki, Fauci, and Nina Jankowicz, the head of the DHS. And yeah, accuses the federal government of violating free speech rights by threatening big tech companies and silencing conservative viewpoints. And I don't even think we talked about Mark Zuckerberg going on Joe Rogan and admitting to this shit. Did we cover that on the podcast at any point?
No, we haven't spoken about it. I mean, I've definitely seen it around, and that's a huge fucking deal. And again, it's just one of those things that like, it's a huge fucking admission, and I just haven't seen anybody make a big deal about it besides us.
Yeah, and so yeah, that happened a couple weeks ago. That Zuckerberg goes on Joe Rogan and says, "Listen, yeah, so we had somebody from I think Homeland Security, or I don't know what department it was, or the FBI, I think." Maybe it was, who contacted him and said, "Hey, looks like there's 100 Biden laptops." Or no, I think they were just talking about, oh, this is an election time, and there's a bunch of stuff coming around, and it's not so so trustworthy, and so maybe you just push it down because it's misinformation. Just believe us, trust us. Don't worry about it. And yeah, I don't think they named any actual stories like outright, but the kind of the messages are pretty clear. And these tech giants, they're not fucking stupid. They know how to play ball. And this is something that we were talking about it at the time. Like, of course this kind of shit is happening. Why the fuck would it not be? It would be prudent for them to do that, and they have the power to do that. So why the fuck would they not?
Yeah,
And
and of course, again, you get called a conspiracy theorist to think that
people are
politicians,
selfish.
whatever, take advantage of such a glorious opportunity. It's like, well, they've done worse. I feel pretty safe assuming that this is true.
Yeah.
Like, they've done so much worse. It's not hard for me to believe that this is, just a thing that's happening. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. Yep, I think they would do that. I would, like, if I was in their position and I didn't have morals, I would do that. Like, try to put myself into the shoes of a soulless, power-hungry creature. Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally logical and totally doable. And there's no reason to think that they wouldn't just take advantage of the opportunity. And
No, of course they
so,
would.
and especially when you see like how little actual pushback, like logical pushback, was elicited, right? It was all control measures, like with Twitter, just suppressing the story altogether. You can't fucking share it. You can't talk about it that way at all. And with Facebook, they didn't outright like ban the sharing of the story, but they just downgraded it in the algorithm so that it didn't appear to as many people as otherwise it would have. And so these are the tactics that these are not the tactics that you take when you're in the right, when you believe in what you're saying and you feel like you can support it and defend it. This is not the route that you take when you believe those things. The route that you take when you've been caught in a fucking with your hand in the cookie jar and you want to make it go away. And so you just say you can't fucking talk about it, or this is going to come out, but it's just going to be a fucking lie. Like there's no real defense
you can't
here.
talk about this stuff. It's a danger to our democracy.
And so yeah, a lawsuit is coming about to address that, and the effect of that was the suppression of the Wuhan lab and its involvement with American funding, and especially Dr. Fauci's connection to that funding. and uh, how the initial idea of a lab leak was basically just suppressed and also labeled a conspiracy theorist, even though it's very logical to think that since there's an American uh you know fucking a sitting advisor who has financial ties to the Wuhan lab, that maybe they would be interested in not allowing that lab to come under scrutiny.
Oh yeah. I mean, realistically, do you think anything's gonna happen from it, or is it just gonna get,
Yeah, I don't know, because I mean,
buried like
these
everything else?
these like attorney generals aren't like state attorney generals. It's not like like a low level like class action lawsuit or some shit that's like being brought about by like a bunch of Alex Jones fans or some shit, right? Like this is two the attorney general in the attorneys general in two states, and so that's like a fairly like that's a position that you don't just brush away and ignore. So I am curious to see like what's going to actually result of this, and how, because these guys aren't used to just sitting back and having their shit pushed aside. Like they're going
No, they're
to
probably
hammer it
aggressively go
home.
after this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if they keep at it and they don't let it drop, and they try to see it through, I mean, who knows what we could see out of this, but it'll be super interesting. And
Oh yeah,
so
it'll be super interesting either way. I mean, just kind of see. I mean, if it does somehow get shunted to the side or dodged or whatever, it'll just be another example of some shit they got away with that everybody knows they shouldn't have.
yeah, their ability to use their
So
power um to to exploit the institutions at their fingertips, basically.
oh yeah.
Not answer for their crimes. In another what was it? Let's say relation to the cabinet and all that is the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre. I think that's her name. I don't remember ever hearing it said out loud. But you see her in the press conference nowadays, and top among the mantras and the slogans and all of that for this administration has been how evil and crazy Donald Trump, how dangerous Donald Trump and his ilk are for questioning the 2020 results. And immediately all of us with a fucking memory longer than a goldfish's were like, but Trump, the 2016 and the subsequent years of panic and accusations, like this all happened, brother. Like you can't just pretend that didn't happen to us. And
I
so
mean, there was a full investigation. Like, there was a full investigation for that took forever, and the walls are closing in on Trump any day now. Blah blah blah. In Mueller, you know how many fucking "In Mueller We Trust" bumper stickers I
oh
see.
god.
Still, I saw one person. And I recognized it because I've seen so many, and it was only half ripped off. They didn't do a very good job getting off, but I saw one bumper sticker that they ripped off, and it made me laugh when I saw it. But I have seen more than a few of those stupid "In Mueller We Trust" bumper stickers. I think honestly, those, like, on my list of dumb bumper stickers, we've got the Gadsden flag next to the thin blue line, which is always my favorite.
Jesus.
Um, I saw one that really blew my mind. It was a Gadsden flag. It was the thin blue line, and then right next to that one, they had the seal of the goddamn FBI
Oh my
on their
god.
car, and it didn't make any sense. It was just the
Sir,
seal, like, on the back, and I'm just
you're
like
very
losing my
confused.
mind on that one. But the Mueller ones are the ones that crack me up the most because I see a lot of them. I still see them around, and it makes me laugh every time.
That's amazing. Hey Jedi, how's it going?
Oh.
Yeah, so basically Brian Kemp from Fox questions Karine Jean-Pierre on some of her past tweets about elections that Republicans were winning.
Here we go. You tweeted Trump stole an election. You tweeted Brian Kemp stole an election. If denying election results is extreme now,
Yeah.
why was
So
it
let's be really clear. That comparison that you made is just ridiculous. I have been
So off the bat, like the defense is the comparison is ridiculous, but doesn't explain why
It's
they are not
it's
alike.
ridiculous because I don't like it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like you're saying these two things are not like one another. So then go ahead, like tell us how. You can't just say,
Explain.
it's ridiculous. But don't think about how. I'm not going to explain how. I'm just going to say it is.
Well, you're asking me a question. Let me answer it.
And you said it was ridiculous.
I was talking specifically at that time of what was happening with voting rights and what was in danger of voting rights. That's what I was speaking to at the time. And here's the thing, I have said Governor Kemp won the election in Georgia. I've been clear about that. I have said President Trump won the election of 2016, and I've been clear about that.
I think that hurt for her to say that one.
Right now is, let's not forget what happened on January 6th, 2020.
So January 6th has to come up as well, because you can't talk about the election without. And the thing is, like, Trump had he never told anybody to fucking go, break into the fucking Capitol building or none of this bullshit.
No. Listen, Donald Trump punched his way through bulletproof glass and grabbed the steering wheel of the presidential limo. Okay, it happened. There were at least one witnesses because we heard it from someone else who heard it from them. Yeah.
And it's not even like questioning elections and forcibly defending fair elections. This is within our history. This is something that has happened to us. One of my favorite, American historical events is the Battle of Athens, Tennessee. And I think it was the late 40s, I want to say, when that happened. And
sounds right.
And so it was after World War II, because it involved some World War II vets. But for anybody who doesn't know the story of the Battle of Athens, Tennessee, there was a big sort of like political collusion group that involved the governor of Tennessee, as well as the mayor in this one town where Athens was located. And I think, well, he would have been the mayor of Athens, and then also the sheriff of the county as well. And all these people were involved in this kind of political cabal, and they ensured that each other would get elected. And there was a lot of suspicion of election tampering within, like, the elections for sheriff and all that shit. And so these when the next election came around and these vets had come back from World War II, they're like, we're going to run our own people in these positions and, overtake these guys. And they ran a successful campaign. They were very popular. And so they wanted to make sure that the ballots were being fairly counted. And what was happening was that the sheriff and the cops had grabbed the ballot boxes away from the polling stations after they closed, and were keeping them hostage or hidden or whatever in the county jail or in the local jail in Athens. And these vets got their guns and went in and basically forcibly took ballot boxes back away from the cops, and got into gunfights, and it lasted for 3 days, I want to say, or 2 or 3 days. I don't think anybody was overtly, like, shot and killed in it, but there were various, like, skirmishes and gunfights, but they eventually ended with the vets taking over the jail and getting the ballot boxes back. And lo and behold, the corrupt officials, the sheriff, who was known to be corrupt at the time, had lost the election. And so this is a, like, questioning elections, and especially and even using force to ensure that the free and fair elections actually occurred and were audited, is an American, it's historically a patriotic thing to do. And
Mission.
and the fucking election in 2020 was hella fucking shady. There was a bunch of weird shit going on with not allowing poll watchers proper access, with the vulnerability of the voting machines. I know as a person who's seen his fair amount of like cybersecurity conference presentations, this kind of shit is just severely insecure. And if you don't have people who are professionals and adamant about keeping things secure, then things can be hacked. It's just super fucking possible for things to be hacked. And you look at all the ways in which there's like human vulnerabilities in these security measures, and how, you know, if you have like yourself a fucking jumpsuit and a clipboard, that you can just get into fucking places and, you know, stick a USB stick wherever the fuck you want to, and as long as you look like you should belong there, a lot of people don't even question it. Like there's, you know, hackers, the thing that a lot of people don't understand about like hacking and security penetration in general is that like sitting down on a laptop like in your room can only get you so far. And a lot of the hacking and you know, security penetration that occurs is done physically by just going into the building, right, and getting on a computer that's within there. Like that's how you deploy a virus in its most, like, you know, effective way, is you get on a computer that's inside of the building and you get in there. And then how do you do that? Well, you have to look like you should be there. You know, you follow a group back inside after they've been on their smoke break, so that they badge into the door and you're like, oh, let me get in right behind you. And you don't have to have a badge, and then, you know, get into the building. You know, and this is the sort of stuff that is actually like prudent hacker skills if you actually wanted to do like black hat shit and get into areas where you're not supposed to, and get information that you're not supposed to and all that. It's not sitting at home on your computer and like, I'm in the mainframe. You know, it's like, no, you just have to physically go there and access it. It's way fucking easy that way.
Yeah,
And
because you don't have to go through anything to get into the system in the first place. You're just straight in.
so my
Well, yeah,
point
and
with
then
all that rant
everything.
was that the vulnerabilities within like the voting machines and digital voting, and even mail-in voting, like all this stuff is extremely vulnerable to penetration through anybody who has the balls to try to pull this shit off.
Most safe and secure election ever, though. So, you know, none of that means anything.
Yeah, and the thing is, if they had the ability to defend that, you know, charge and that categorization, that okay, we could have a conversation, but they refuse to actually talk about like all of these lawsuits that were brought up. They're like, oh yeah, all those lawsuits, they failed and stuff. Was like, well, they were dismissed out of hand without actually hearing any of the evidence. This is this is an ongoing thing where they're just like, yeah, we're not going to listen to anything that's being brought up. We're just going to dismiss them. And so, well, that doesn't prove anything. That's just you brushing the problem under the table.
Well, no, the excuse was what, that even listening to the evidence would lend credence to these rumors, and therefore we just have to reject anything that is presented as evidence entirely. And it's like, that just seems real fucking convenient, doesn't it? Just seems like a real fucking convenient excuse not to actually go through any of this.
It's just so silly when people are like, well, how dare you believe this conspiracy about the voting being possibly corrupt? We just dismissed it from court without listening to any of the evidence. That's clear indication that it's not true. Like, what? Really? Come on.
If they lose the fucking midterms, they're gonna roll right around and they're gonna say, I mean, they're already priming, they're already getting ready for it, because Joe Biden has talked about the possibility of the midterm elections being fraudulent, which is funny because Joe Biden, like his press secretary, is sitting here saying that you can't say that. Joe Biden fucking said that there was a possibility that the midterm elections could be fraudulent. So, you know, they're already getting ready for the possibility. They lose the fucking midterms, and then, you know, they turn around and they start this narrative back up again, and we get a 2-year, 4-year witch hunt of people, you know, looking for evidence of shit that didn't happen.
Yeah, it's always talking out of both sides there. At any time they can lose an election, they go ahead and open that jar and maybe it wasn't so fair. And then obviously anytime there's a difference between the popular vote and the electoral college, vote. And it's like, okay, well, that's the strategy, right? To win the presidency is to win the electors. It has been for fucking since the inception. But they only bring up protests when the popular vote was, you know, differed from that. They're like, well, you know, everyone popular vote. And it's like, well, that's good for her, but that's not what the fucking contest was. So shut the fuck up. I don't give a fuck about the popular. Well, I don't give a fuck about the vote in general, but it's just silly to sort of like always bring this up when the rules were known beforehand, and that's how everybody knows it works.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so yeah, like I was saying before, we had 9/11 just happened yesterday. Well, anniversary of 9/11 at least. We did. But
The anniversary of 9/11, in which somehow became about January 6th.
yeah, that's always amazing to see people bring up. And so I just came across this video that's fascinating to watch. It's an interview with college students. I think this is from this year. So September. It was from it's the 8th. So yeah, it was published 4 days before 9/11. So 5 days ago. And no, 4 days ago today. And yeah, it's very interesting. So current college students who obviously were not alive during 9/11, or if they were very, very young, because these are like, you know, what, 18 to 21-year-olds. And yeah, what they understand happened on 9/11, who was involved with it, what were the reasons for doing it. And yeah, I'm sure it goes about as well as you think it will go.
Doing this interview kind of like shows me like how little I actually knew about it. It's kind of scary.
Hey guys, it's Kara Zupkis with Young America's Foundation. As the 21st anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks approaches, we're here at George Mason University where we're talking to students to see just how much they know about what actually happened on September 11th and if they think that their schools are doing a good enough job of teaching what happened on that tragic day. So do you know what major anniversary is coming up this weekend?
I do not know.
No, I don't think so.
I am definitely not really sure what's going on this weekend.
I have no idea.
This coming weekend, not Labor Day.
Yeah.
I do not.
I do not.
No.
Not off the top of my head.
No, I'm not aware.
No, we do not personally. Nope.
Who attacked us on 9/11?
So right off the bat, like, it's not even really, I guess, the young people's consciousness is like a major, you know, event or historical thing. I'm kind of shocked by that, because obviously every 9/11 that comes about, the media always has these programming and remembrances and never forgets and all that. So it's kind of weird to me that like, it wouldn't even occur to them if you're like on the weekend of 9/11, you're like, what's good, anniversary history. It's like if at the beginning, the first week of December, they were to ask us, is like, hey, what fucking, event is going to go on, this coming week, that's like marks a historical event that happened. And we go, well, Pearl Harbor. And I would just, like, if you asked me about it, even though it happened fucking 70 some odd years ago, if you asked me at the beginning of December, what events going on this week, I could probably tell you. Well, let's see here, historical, like an anniversary. Oh yeah, Pearl Harbor, which I remember correctly was the 7th. I'd be embarrassed if I like brought this up and didn't remember that it was the 7th, but yeah, that's what I believe it was. And like 9/11 was much more recent and much more like relevant to our daily lives, like currently, and what's going on with us today. And yeah, it's kind of weird to me that like this group of students would like on so if this was published on the 8th, that means it was probably like Thursday. Well, it was Thursday when it's published, so maybe earlier that week, like they had gone like the Monday or Tuesday or so, and they're like, what's going on this weekend that's like a major historical event. 9/11 jumps out to me immediately. So crazy that it doesn't jump out to them.
Yeah, that's not.
Who attacked us?
Yeah, exactly.
Do not personally. Nope.
Who attacked us on 9/11?
Who attacked us? What's the group?
By the way, the correct answer is Al Qaeda, and obviously led by Osama bin Laden. That's the answer. Al Qaeda, Islamic. Even if you were just to be like is Al Qaeda, which is an Islamic terrorist group led by Osama bin Laden, that's acceptable answer.
Group called?
ISIS.
ISIS, yeah.
Or terror.
So that was the first answer. ISIS, which didn't exist until like 2009.
It's excellent.
Terrorist. I don't know the exact name. I forgot.
Okay.
I don't want to say the wrong. Iraq? Afghanistan?
It was, I believe, a group of terrorists that hijacked a few planes, flew them into the Twin Towers.
Osama bin Laden.
It was the terrorist group, yeah.
Okay. And do you know like what terrorist group?
Not specifically.
Dude,
no.
hold on. I just gotta think. 1 second.
Oh, yeah. It's been...
I did know. I did.
We were taught this.
Do you know who attacked us on 9/11?
We're taught this. Jesus.
Yeah. Like, again, I mean, it is like you have to expect that there's, people are continuing to be born. So obviously there's people who were not alive when 9/11 happened. But it's just so weird to see people so clueless about an event that I clearly remember.
Very loosely, not really.
Oh my god, I'm blanking on
Osama bin Laden and the terrorist group.
Yeah, it's a terrorist group. I just can't remember.
Do you know why they attacked us? Like, what was their reasoning for attacking us?
I'm just grateful that none of them said the Taliban. That's what was
none of them have said the Taliban so far, so that's good.
That was my fear. But then it's like, they're not even, like, they wouldn't even know who the Taliban is, right? Like, they would probably think that the Taliban is another terrorist group. Or if, like, you were to claim that the Taliban is a terrorist group, they would just kind of believe that without questioning it. And we're like, no, the Taliban is, well, it's a family, but also just a government party that holds power. They wanted to turn over Osama bin Laden. They were negotiating his, turning him over to the United States, and the United States like refused them every time. Okay. So anyways, the Taliban is usually the answer for people who are like our age, who might, or they might like mention them in the same breath as Al Qaeda, because the whole narrative and the whole mantra at the time was that the two were related, the two were in collusion with one another, and so just these kids are not even old enough to even know that like lie. They just have these very vague and generic understandings of Osama bin Laden and the terrorist group, without any like specificity.
A terrorist group. Yeah.
And yeah, so the next question I think is going to be like, oh, what was their reasoning, or what was their justification for it?
Do you know why they attacked us? Like, what was their reasoning for attacking us?
I don't know necessarily the reason. I mean, they're just considered a terrorist group. I guess that's all we really have on that.
I personally have no idea.
Was it a retaliation of
Sorry, that
someone
one's
who
so
was...
funny. I guess that's all we really have on that. Like, yeah, that's all we know about them. That's all we got. They do bad stuff. That's all we got on them.
They're terrorists. They like to do terrorist things. There's just no rhyme or reason behind it. They're just really mean.
That's all we really got on that. That's
they didn't
all
get
the
enough
intelligence
hugs.
we managed to gather.
They didn't get enough hugs, and so they decided America was terrible, and they just end their lives. It's for
because they're the bad guys. They do the bad guy stuff. That's all we got.
Jack Bauer fights them on 24. That's all I know.
Oh man.
President at the time, like Bush,
Revenge.
for...
I don't know, the war they had back then.
That was the closest. That was the closest answer right there. And it's funny that like he seems the most like, it seems like the most like silly of them, like how not taking it as super seriously with just kind of like static answers. But like, yo, homie was pretty close to the mark on that one.
Pretty close.
I mean, so revenge was part of it. Also, this desire to goad America into war in the Middle East so that they could drain our resources and drive us out of the region eventually, which was largely successful.
I guess to terrorize, I don't know, I guess.
Probably not.
We try to bring our country down, I guess. One of the reasons for that, trying to cause chaos.
Wasn't born then.
I don't know. I really don't know.
It was kind of a, what's it called? They're trying to save kind of morals and everything, so something like that.
We believe.
So that's the kind of the trickle down of the whole they hate us for our freedoms reasoning, right? Is that they as extreme Islamists, they have this ideological opposition to Western culture and the United States, and it's this whole like moral indignation where they feel like they just have to fight us because of our moral failings as you know, Western culture, and yeah, that's flat out just not fucking true. Because when they examine motivations of people who do suicide attacks, suicide bombings, like the kamikaze attacks and things, the motivation is never as simple as just like this
They don't
sort
like
of
us.
yeah, like they have this whole like moral judgment of us. It is that they feel that we are an existential threat to them and their existence and their culture in some sort of way. And so it's a much more personal and emotive motivation than just general like religious fervor. Which is never like, it's motivation for people to group together and to fight others, but like suicide attacks, especially like people who are so motivated by the cause that they are willing to kill themselves in the process of fighting for that cause. That extreme you know, a dedication is not just born from simple ideological fervor in terms of like, yeah, like being convinced because of your religion and that. Like, it's usually the result of people who feel backed into a corner and who feel that a message needs to be sent, and that even with their death, it's worth that risk. And this is one thing that happened with one of the 9/11 attackers, who was like a student. I forget where. He was a student somewhere in Europe, and he heard about some attacks. I think he was either in Pakistan or it was related to Israel and Palestinians. But there was a specific attack that happened, and then he left like his you know, what he was doing in Europe at the time to go train with Al Qaeda. And so this sort of stuff like that people are willing to like fight and die over is because of allegiance to and defense against like, you know, imperialism and attacks and things like that. And this is something that we'll get into with more of the 9/11 cover in a minute. But yeah, that's what would like her answer before reminded me. It was like, oh, you know, this sort of like moral outrage and indignation and stuff. And it's like, well, that's a remnant of the story, but that's not really the real motivation behind it. It's not.
That's not why they went through all that trouble. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
they hate us for their freedoms, just woefully inadequate at describing and assessing the motives of the 9/11 attackers and terrorist attackers in general, especially suicide attacks.
Over wars and things that people had going on between both countries.
I don't know. I know they were just like extremists or something about the government. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you think that schools, generally speaking, are doing a good enough job of teaching students about the importance of this anniversary and the significance of what happened that day?
Not really. I remember only being taught about it twice, once in like 5th grade, the second time in 9th grade, and since then I haven't really heard much at all about it. So yeah, I feel like you can see I forgot everything, so they probably should, you know, teach just a little bit more about what happened and why it's so important.
I think it for sure can be improved on. I think it's just like taught as it happened, and we should just know that it happened, which is so unfortunate. Like right now, like I can't give you a full-on answer about the event, which is honestly quite tragic.
They don't really teach about it, and like doing this interview kind of like shows me like how little I actually knew about it. And it's kind of scary because it was such like a huge event that still is affecting the U.S.
I suppose not, given I don't know, so I guess not.
I personally don't think so, because I have no idea really the reasoning behind it. I haven't really heard of it much outside of like the anniversary of 9/11, so I feel like high schools aren't really doing much to educate the students.
I kind of think there's a big issue of it becoming like moral panic in a way to marginalize a group of people.
I don't believe so. We are truly too focused.
Yep. There's the you know, the progressive sweeping, right? The progressive broom sweeping the story under the table because some people might be Islamophobic over. And the thing is that if you tell the truth about the event, then there's no Islamophobia to be had, because like I just discussed, it's like, yo, this is not about being a loyal Muslim. There's a lot more to this.
Well, yeah, there's a lot more to it, and but at the same time, it's like I've also seen. I mean, I saw it just actually on the, I think it was the day of Sunday, yesterday. God, somebody saying that yeah, like we're mocking 9/11 and we're making fun of it. We're kind of all laughing about it, but that's because it's worth mocking because of all the racism that happened because of 9/11. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of like, Islamophobia that came up afterwards, but like there's way more to worry about than just what fits on the fucking progressive stack. Like you're missing the big picture here.
Yeah, it's like perpetual warfare is like a huge fucking deal that like this is like fucking giant elephant in the room that we need to talk about, because it's part of our, like, half of our budget goes to military spending, and most of the other half goes to entitlements. So like one, like good 40%, chunk of our spending goes to the military. And a lot of people intuitively know that like, oh, military spending should be lower and we're wasting a bunch of money. And 9/11 is directly related to the reasons like why, and they're horrible like events. It's not just like military spending, like going off to like buy some planes and bombs and they just sit around doing nothing. It's we're being sent over to places where we shouldn't be, killing people who shouldn't be killed, like fucking bombing, weddings and barbecues and shit like that. And people are getting angry with us over there because we killed their fucking uncle and their neighbor and like half of the fucking town. It's not nothing, right? This is a very significant thing. Like people's lives are hanging in the fucking balance. People are, going starving in Yemen. They're dying of cholera because water treatment facilities are being bombed. This is fucking horrible. Like this it is so impossible to overstate the seriousness and gravity of the U.S. war state and the urgency with which it should be stopped and criticized and just constantly hammered into the minds of every single living American. Like, it's very important that people understand the history of what went on there and how we're continuing to suffer from it. And people generally know, like that one girl commented, they're like, oh yeah, we're still like, we're feeling the remnants of all that. And it's like, yeah, we fucking are, but you don't even know how, because you don't know a fucking thing about it. And so, it's just, yeah, I can never how fucking important this is. I think this is the last guy.
About the political correctness.
Oh yeah, so he's the one who calls it out.
So we are currently too focused about the political correctness.
So yeah, that's what college students know about, is political correctness, and how that affects situations. But I mean, of course, a government school is not going to teach how blowback works and how there that part of history is right where we teach about how Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan funded the Mujahideen and helped Osama bin Laden like come into power, and how it wasn't just like Al Qaeda and the Mujahideen that was like in the immediate region, we also created like a huge campaign to gather Islamic fighters from all around the surrounding regions to join with Al Qaeda and fight the Soviets over there. And so, you know, and then we have Clinton flip-flopping back and forth, and you know, starting the war. And like all this stuff has been going on perpetually since the late 70s. And this is stuff that was never taught in schools. Like this is never gonna have that in your, you know, Jimmy Carter fucking module in U.S. history class. And I'm actually
No.
I am actually so fascinated to know what like a U.S. Government or U.S. history class would teach about the Bush years. Because now that's not like, you know, the Bush years was what we were going through at the time. And now it's technically U.S. history, right? It's at least should be included in contemporary examinations of it. But I mean, you know, he's got a masterclass teaching decisive leadership. So obviously they're not doing a very good job of teaching what went on during those years. And of course they're not going to teach the truth about the Obama years. No fucking way they'll ever do that.
Oh, hell no.
That's off the fucking table.
Hell no. It'll never happen.
But yeah, it's just kind of amazing to me that like they get like one fucking little section in high school. Like you would think that like liberally minded, you know, high school students, like they're coming out. Actually, another thing that we should have brought up was Project Veritas's recent videos that have been done where they did undercover filming of school officials. They were like a superintendent and a principal of a school and a couple of others who talked about how they have hiring policies that are adamantly anti-conservative, and that if people don't answer these like diversity questions correctly, they're just not considered for the job, and all this shit. And it's like you would think that these people who are so gung-ho about activism and you know, social justice would jump onto the anti-war train as well and teach about the truth of the Bush years at the very least. Because I mean, like I thought it was a nice, sensible, progressive, liberal thing to do to hate George W. Bush. And so yeah, I would think that these you know, teachers who are already super comfortable indoctrinating kids with activist, you know, anti-American sentiments, just from, you know, the Prague standards, like I would think that being anti-war and anti-Bush would fall right in line with that kind of shit.
Yeah, you would think.
But yeah, apparently it's not being taught at all. So we have you know, the great Scott Horton to teach us about it. And this was from last year's anniversary. 21, yeah. And so he did a talk in Washington, D.C. At the End the Damn Wars rally. And so, yeah, I thought we'd have him talk about it.
You guys hear me all right?
Go Texas.
All right. Mine's going to be longer and less exciting. My talk is going to be longer and less exciting. I want to start with the simple fact that's off topic. What? Oh. Volume up? Oh, I'm too far away. You got to make out with it. All right. I already had the germ, so I'm good. Oh, listen. This is off topic, but I gotta say it because it's all over TV, and this is a refrain. It comes and goes. It was especially prominent in the early days of the terror war. Mine and Birds riding in the back of my taxi cab would always repeat, they saw on TV, well, I think George W. Bush did a really great job leading the country that day. And they just say that over and over again. But if you ask somebody to detail what they mean about that, then they can't tell you. Because the reality is that George Bush fled in cowardly terror to Louisiana, where he stayed for 4 hours. Then he fled to Nebraska to a giant underground H-bomb bunker at Strategic Air Command in Nebraska, and he didn't bring his sorry ass back to Washington, D.C. until 7:30 that night. And you're telling me you thought he did a great job handling things that day? He didn't handle a damn thing until he got up there on TV, even though he knew it was Al-Qaeda that did it, and said, we're going to war against terror, and it'll never end. Yeah, what a great leader. Let's all just tell each other that slogan over and over again. I think he did a great job that day, just because we heard everybody else say it and we think it makes it sound smart. How about that? All right, anyway, here's the point. That just pisses me off because I hate George Bush a lot. Here's the thing of it, man. September 11th was a provocation. Okay? It's not just that it was revenge. They were trying to get you and your dad and your mom and your government to believe stupid things and act in stupid ways. In terrorism, the action is in the reaction of the opposition. So, first of all, the motive that made the former freedom fighters under Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan turn into the enemy terrorists and attack the United States was American occupation of bases on the Holy Arabian Peninsula, land of Mecca and Medina. Support for Israel and their oppression of Palestinians and Lebanese. Support for the dictators of the region, meaning especially King Fahd in Saudi and Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. So pressure on the Middle Eastern dictators to keep the oil prices artificially low to subsidize our economy at their expense, and turning a blind eye to Russia, China, and India in their oppression of Muslims. And what's interesting is that's not true. That last part, Bill Clinton supported Al-Qaeda in Bosnia and in Kosovo against Russia's closest allies, the Serbs, and supported the Uyghurs in training them in Afghanistan for use against the Chinese, and also supported the Chechen terrorists. While they were financing Boris Yeltsin and Vladimir Putin's side of the war, they were also financing the terrorist side of the war in Chechnya in the late 1990s. And in fact, after September 11th, Bill Clinton, Tom Lantos, and Brad Sherman, all Democrats, said, geez, why would these Muslims attack us after everything we've done for them lately? When the reality was that all of the things that America was doing that were motivating the attacks against the United States were still continuing. Bill Clinton was supporting them, but he had failed to bribe them off. Okay?
Like that 4 minutes right there. Imagine how many people in this fucking country haven't the first fucking clue about any of that fucking story.
Yeah, no, most people don't. And I mean, I didn't know much about it until, honestly, I started talking to people, well, you and people like you, and then looking more. I mean, nobody knew about this shit. Nobody.
No, I mean, and I knew, so I've known about the general idea that blowback caused it since like 2008, 2009-ish, because of Ron Paul, like when one of the most fucking famous bits. Because the 2008 and the Ron Paul election was a really big turning point for me, like intellectually and, you know, politically and everything, because it also happened to be around the time that a friend of mine had introduced me to Thomas Sowell. And I've talked about the story on here, the podcast, and other places as well. But it was just a sort of like fusion between what I was discovering through Thomas Sowell and my buddy who was telling me, hey, look up like his debates and shit like that, and also the fact that Ron Paul was running for president at the time, and the things that he would say like in debates and shit, like the Republican debate, he was asked about his basically, he was asked if he believed that America like invited 9/11, and so he's like, "Listen, man, like I didn't invent the concept of blowback. The CIA did. They have talked about this fucking like they have talked about openly about how this can occur. And so when we have an attack on this country and we know the group that did it, we have to look into their motivations and how that lines up with reality, right? And if they say like, listen, we did this because of U.S. presence in Saudi, which is a holy land for us. We did it because of the support of Israel and the fact that they're oppressing people that we are aligned with religiously. And you guys, your money is helping do all this shit. And so we oppose you with everything we have because of these reasons, and it's going to come out to bite you. They openly talk about their motivations, and you could just believe them. You can say, listen, like they've been harping on about this for years and years and years now, and it's no shock to the system that they're going to act on this. This is what Ron Paul said, like on national television during a Republican debate. And Rudy Giuliani, who was also another candidate at the time, he was in the running for the Republican nomination. He's like, it's absolutely disgusting as a New Yorker who lived through the attacks that he would suggest that America is at fault for causing 9/11, and he should retract that statement right now. And I'm going to give him the opportunity to retract that if he wants to. And it's just like, shut the fuck up with your faux indignation, you prick. And so like, yeah, I've known like generally about like US, like the fact that the terrorists were motivated by US like actions and their warmongering, but like the depth of the detail of how that goes, again, I knew very generally that Osama bin Laden came from Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda had been previously funded by Ronald Reagan to fight the Soviets. And then that was all I pretty much knew. Like that was the depth of my understanding of it. It was just like, okay, Al-Qaeda came about because of the US and their whole deal with the Saudis, or their whole deal with the Soviets. And then later on, Osama bin Laden got mad because we're continuing to do stuff in the region. Again, super generic understanding of what that even meant. And then, and therefore we were attacked. And so this was something that I was known since like about 20 years old or so, like late teens, early 20s, because of like Ron Paul talking about this shit on live TV, during Republican debates, which is on a national scale. And so yeah, it was sort of like on the forefront at the time, but again, my understanding of it was very sort of like I had bullet points about it, but I didn't know the full picture. And when I started reading like Fool's Errand, which is just about Afghanistan alone, it was just shocking how corrupt it all was, and like how easily it could have been avoided. Like I was talking about with the December of 2001, and how easily Osama bin Laden could have been caught, and how all this war shit would have just the justification for any of it would have evaporated, even if they wanted to like pivot to Iraq or any of that shit. It's like, okay, well, we got the terrorists who did 9/11. Like that would have been fucking end of story. Most of the American public would have been just done with war. So they couldn't allow that to happen. And yeah, so that whole bit of the story, what happened afterwards, the Obama year, all this stuff is just like absolutely astounding levels of corruption and evil going on for decades. And nuts. And so
Yeah, I mean, and yeah,
my
once you-
understanding so my point was that even my understanding of it, which was already riddled with corruption, was just scratching the fucking surface of the iceberg.
Yeah, I mean, once you really understand the depth, then you really start to understand like just how, and this isn't like an isolated incident. You start questioning, everything else.
Oh yeah, that's why when this whole Ukraine conflict comes about, people like us who are like, hold on a fucking minute. I don't think that this is the first good war we've ever fought. Like, even if we, have all these other we've heard justifications for all this shit before. So this whole fervor to send off arms and to defend this take this moral stance which involves, you know, bombs and planes and shit. Like, maybe there's more to this fucking story too. And lo and fucking behold, there was. And so, yeah, it's just something that's we're gonna constantly have our finger on the fucking pulse, because we know how much these fuckers lie to send us off to war and to get us involved in bullshit we don't need to be involved in.
But then again, so that was the motive. But the strategy was to make America invade Afghanistan. They wanted America to invade Afghanistan, to bog us down, bleed us to bankruptcy, and force our empire out of the Middle East the long and the hard way. Now here we are 20 years into this thing, $30 trillion in debt, and we're slowly but surely withdrawing from the Middle East now in humiliation and defeat, having achieved absolutely nothing except, as bin Laden said, some benefits for our politically connected corporations, which has put the American government and the terrorists on the same side as each other as strategic allies against the people of the Middle East and against the people of the United States of America. Now, when George W. Bush first went to Afghanistan, and this is kind of buried, they just said over and over again, the Taliban won't negotiate, but that wasn't true. The Taliban offered to negotiate 3 times. At first they wanted proof, but by the time the bombing started in October 2001, they dropped their demand for proof. They said they would extradite bin Laden to any third country without evidence if we would just stop the bombing. Bush said too little, too late. Now, you may say, especially if you're old enough to have lived through this back 20 years ago, your point of view might be, you know what? I'm really mad about those towers, and arrest and trial isn't good enough for me. I want these Al-Qaeda guys bombed, and I want them shot, and I want them dead. And I might say, for the sake of argument, fine. But then what did W. Bush do? He went to Kabul. He took the side of General Rashid Dostum, who had served the Soviet Union and the Northern Alliance, to do a regime change in Kabul and overthrow the Taliban that did not attack us, while he let Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri escape from Tora Bora. While the CIA and the Delta Force begged for reinforcements, they were denied for weeks. And then once bin Laden escaped into Pakistan, they were forbidden from following him across the border into a friendly nation where they were perfectly welcome to give chase. And then he installed a new government in Kabul. And then he declared it America's object to protect that new government against all of its enemies forever. And that put America on the side of the worst drug dealers and torturers and murderers and child rapists and warlords in Afghan history, while fighting some of them, recruiting the rest. And that's why the government that they created in Kabul was always destined for failure. It was the enemy of the people of Afghanistan.
But did you ever hear the stories of, I think it was called the Bachabazi tradition in Afghanistan, which was very prominent during these years?
No, I didn't.
It's basically this, I don't know, ceremony or some shit. Like, it's basically this shit that's done where they get a bunch of boys and they like have them dance for older guys and shit. And they're like dressed very femininely and shit. And of course, it's just like a breeding ground for fucking molestation and all this bullshit. And it's just, yeah, it's basically this human trafficking that goes on in Afghanistan, and where young boys are made to dance for, and it's really fucking disgusting. But it's like not. I forget the actual origins of it though, because it's not just this thing. Like, it's very centered in Afghanistan too. It's not just like a general like Islamic thing or anything, but it was a very specific to like specific Islamic like power groups and shit. And so yeah, that flourished during the early 2000s at the time. So yeah, there's fucked up going ons with our involvement in Afghanistan. It's like we've helped like protect and empower these dudes who like helped bring about this practice or perpetuate it. at the time. And so, because I remember there were also being stories of the fact that American servicemen who were stationed around the area knowing about this shit that's going on and being told that they couldn't interfere with it.
Yeah, because that would be culturally insensitive, right?
Yeah. Well, it's also because like these people, the people involved with it were part of, like, allied with us in certain ways and stuff. So we weren't going to topple like a friendly, quote unquote friendly, official or all this. Like we're not gonna do anything to rock the boat with people who are part of our in group, basically.
Afghanistan, not their security force. And then what they do? They lied. And they pretended that bin Laden, who they let escape, had a secret alliance with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And they lied that they knew that Saddam Hussein had chemical, biological, and even was reconstituting, as Dick Cheney said, nuclear weapons. She never had in the first place, pretty difficult to reconstitute, but anyway. And as Bush said repeatedly, just imagine September 11th, but this time with the terrorists armed with weapons of mass destruction from Saddam Hussein's Iraq. In order to manipulate your family into being so afraid that you would let them start a war against a country that did not attack us, that had nothing to do with the attack on this country. As the previous speaker indicated, Wesley Clark was shown by a general at the Pentagon the neocons hit list for regime change. 7 nations: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, and ending with Iran. Not one of those countries had an alliance with Osama bin Laden. Not one of those countries had the slightest thing to do with the attack on the United States. And they just decided, you know, a lot of people in the last 20 years have been 9/11 truthers and thought that Dick Cheney and the Israelis or Saudis did the attack just so they could have an excuse. But the reality is, they might as well have done it themselves. They exploited the death of those 3,000 people like they didn't matter at all. Like the grief of their families didn't matter at all. Suckers, now that you're afraid, we're gonna trick you into letting us have bonus wars and attack people who had nothing to do with this. And I know, I was around. I was 25 when the attack happened, and I had a job where I was interacting with the public constantly. And people believed that Saddam Hussein did 9/11. If you ask them, how come we're waiting to bomb them then? Why are we asking the French for permission to start attacking them if we're just defending ourselves? Doesn't matter. They were afraid. The president said that this is the enemy, and Saudis hiding in Afghanistan, Iraqi Baathists in Baghdad, same difference to them. If the president says it's necessary, what are you saying? He's lying us into war? That's absurd. And then what they do? In invading Iraq, all they did was empower their strategic rivals, Iran. They hated Ayatollah Khamenei. They fought an entire civil war for his best friends and put them in power in Baghdad. And then they wish they didn't. And then they launched what's called the redirection in 2006, where they decided, you know what? We don't really mind Al-Qaeda all that bad after all. They might have killed 3,000 American civilians and they here in the United States, and they might have been the worst part of the Sunni insurgency in Iraq, but our government decided that they hate the Ayatollah more. And so they went right back to their strategy of backing the bin Ladenites, just as they had since Jimmy Carter. Where now the war on terrorism, such as it has taken place in small amounts in Iraq after Al-Qaeda came there after the war, in Pakistan and in Yemen, these are the aberration. America's gone right back to backing Al-Qaeda again. Fatah al-Islam in Lebanon, Muslim Brotherhood groups, and of course all different, Ahrar al-Sham and Jabhat al-Nusra and all the terrorists in Syria, the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group and Ansar al-Sharia and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb in their fights in North Africa. And right now, even though Obama started a drone war against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula back in 2009, he changed his mind. And in 2015, he took Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula's side against their enemies, the Houthis, because the Houthis are friends with the hated enemy, Iran. And so here our government, as they mark this occasion all over this town.
And so the Houthis would be the group that's being bombed in Yemen. And so
Right.
So yeah, that we're it's like a thing to keep in mind too with the Yemen war is that like the people that Saudi is giving arms to and supporting, who we are supporting too, who we used to refuel their planes, it is the Al Qaeda offshoot groups who are fighting the Houthis. The government at the time is allied with Al Qaeda, and so that's the side that we're supporting in Yemen at the
And celebrate what victims they are. They're up to their eyeballs to this very day in the highest treason, fighting back again on the side of the Al Qaeda enemy, the enemy of the American people, the strategic allies of the United States government. That's your security force. And they spent $10 trillion. Now, if I told you, hey, at least we made $10 trillion off the war, well, that ain't right, is it? But somebody did, didn't they? Right around here. You can smell the blood on the money. It's a windy day. And we got a police state here at home. The choking life that Osama bin Laden promised us. He didn't hate our freedom, but he did want to destroy it. He thought it'd be hilarious if the American people adopted a totalitarian security state in order to protect them from the threat of terrorism. He was gambling, wrongly, that the American people would be so jealous of our liberty that we wouldn't stand for it. If we have to sacrifice our Bill of Rights to maintain our Middle East empire, then screw it, right? The American people decided the other way. And here we are, a Patriot Act, thousands, tens of thousands of people tortured in Afghanistan and Iraq, more than 100 of them tortured to death by the military and the CIA. We have a Department of Homeland Security that, as you all know, will never go away and has determined that you are now its greatest enemy. And we've got 30,000. It's a brand new study out from the Cost of War Project, okay? 30,000 suicides of veterans of the Iraq and Afghan wars. Now, when you hear about suicides 22 a day, a lot of times that includes World War II and Korea and Vietnam veterans getting old. This is just from the 21st century terror wars. We lost 4,500 guys in Iraq. We lost 2,500 guys in Afghanistan. We lost 30,000 to them shooting themselves in the fucking head because of the betrayal of this government and frankly of the American people tolerating this policy.
And yeah, that's a really important thing that people get behind is that, like, look, this is not just about being outraged over brown people being bombed. I mean, that's a very huge and important part of it, sure. But we are sacrificing our own kids to this shit. This is like fucking teenagers and young adults who are going through this shit, right? Like bombings and like their friends getting shot in the face and shit. And people don't really respond to war very well, like very healthily, emotionally, right? It's usually a pretty scarring and negatively impactful thing to happen to a person.
Sending them off to kill and die and sacrifice their best friends for lies. January 2001, the first month of not just the new century, but the new millennium. And the American people put Prescott Bush's grandson in the chair with Dick Cheney and a bunch of agents of the Likud party from Israel who got the entire millennium off on the wrong foot. 20 years in now, more than 1 million dead, 10 trillion blown. The entire Middle East, hell, from Nigeria to Pakistan, destabilized. But it's not too late to start to put it right. We start to put it right by putting an end to doing what is wrong. It's not giving in to terrorists to abolish the empire that we never should have had in the first place. It's the right thing to do. And it's the only way to protect this country from terrorism. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's like a fucking criminally under attended event right there. Like, this is, you know, one of the most important things that people could be, you know, feel a cause to be an activist over. Ending these right up there. And
Jesus Christ. Yeah, I mean, I had heard some of the statistics from like, you know, just the death casualties. But
yeah,
like I
because
hadn't heard
like the
some of the
million dead
exact.
that he talked about includes on the Middle Eastern side, so that's not just our troops, but you know, a lot of fucking people, and obviously they matter too. But yeah, we may have lost like a little over like you know, something close to 10,000 between Iraq and Afghanistan, but 3 times that many when it comes to suicide.
Yeah, I mean that's just like the suicide numbers are just like fucking staggering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fucking significant thing, and something that, you know, we don't need to be doing to people, and it is, you know, it's just perpetuated by a
It's a
stack of
major part of our
lies built
foreign
on
policy.
lies.
Like it's a major part of our foreign policy. This is just a fucking meat grinder.
Yeah, and the fact that like young people have, you know very little about this, and you know, like I've mentioned before, you know, it's just amazing to me that Joe Biden is president now, right? Because he's largely responsible for us going to Iraq and being at war there. You know, people talk about how he voted to go in, and I always say, I tell people like, no. Him voting for that is this is a small bit of the story. When he was the chair of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations that oversaw the decision to go into Iraq, and as the chairman of the that committee, he controlled who was brought before the Senate to testify on for that case. It would have been to testify about Saddam Hussein and the weapons of mass destruction and the threat to America and the connection to, you know, the terrorists and all this stuff. And so he stacked it with war hawks that testified before the Senate that that all this stuff was true and that they were dangerous. And so he was instrumental in convincing everybody to vote for the war. So he didn't just vote for it, he convinced everybody else to do it as well by stacking the hearings on it with warhawks. And now he's president. And I remember talking to like people who were like 20 and shit, these like, get out and vote, it's the most important election of our lives, you know, type of motherfuckers, and telling them this story. And they're just like, well, you know, war is something that just kind of like goes on, you know, constantly, and like yeah, and it should stop, and we need to protest that and not keep electing these fucking warmongers and opportunists into these, like, just the urgency was totally lost on them. They just have passively accepted it because now they've moved on to this woke bullshit activism that doesn't matter, like how, like, compared to people fucking being bombed back to the fucking Stone Age.
Yeah, but they don't care because it's not happening in front of them, and you know it's almost become like, you know, with the way the fucking with the way the money and everything's set up, it's like this is what we have to basically do in order to keep the money flowing, and so Like, this is it. This is what we've accepted. That we just have to keep doing this over and over and over and over again. You know, we start getting into a financial slump. Let's start another fucking war.
Yeah, it's honestly, and you know, this is we have 9/11, and you know, people do all the remembrances and all that, like I mentioned, and this is the lesson that we need to learn about 9/11. This is what we should be talking about every year during, you know, this weekend or this, you know, the month where this fucking happens. We should always be talking about this, but like this is the takeaway that we should um you know, be discussing around this time, because this is 9/11's legacy. This is the reasons for it happening, and the consequences of it happening, like what resulted with our government officials. These are the lessons that we should learn from history, and it's amazing to us that to me that we, and this happens, you know, throughout the years. This has happened. You know, there were lessons completely missed during the progressive era, right? And FDR's fucking New Deal. All this, there's lessons peppered throughout history that have just been ignored over and over and over again. And yeah, the things people choose to become activists, astounding when this sort of stuff is going on.
Kind of shit that keeps all of this focused, keeps all of us focused on fucking fighting each other constantly, right? Nothing's gonna change because, you know, you're too busy screaming at somebody over microaggressions, or, you know, not respecting your fucking pronouns or what bathrooms they can use and all this other shit. And yeah, it just keeps us completely divided along ideological lines. Now, granted, there are some people that, I mean, we're never gonna get along with because they're authoritarians. I'm never gonna get along with authoritarian. It doesn't matter which side of the spectrum that they're on. Ultimately, we have radically different approaches to how we think problems need to be solved, and how much power people need to have. So, like, yeah, I mean, even if somebody's, you know, more on the right of things economically, and there's, you know, similar to my views there, we're gonna disagree still because if they're fucking authoritarian, we're not gonna have anything to say to each other, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
But
we rag on conservatives just as much as progressive leftists.
constantly, and you know, honestly, it's like they're right sometimes, but then, you know, other times they start coming up with these solutions that just involve, and again, they have the same problem. They have the exact same problem that progs have. It's that they fundamentally, and they're better about it, I'll give them that, but that's because they've been losing for a long time in terms of this. They still have the same problem of, we want to give a government XYZ power, whatever. We want to make this a law, we want to make a new thing, whatever. And then they don't stop to consider, okay, what happens when we're no longer in charge, quote unquote. What happens if this gets used against us? Because it's happened before. I mean, we had a whole lot of, you know, laws that went into effect during, you know, these big protests and stuff, things limiting, you know, people being able to protest and shit like that. And it's like, on the surface, sure, it seems good because people were burning shit down, and I can understand the knee-jerk reaction to that and people wanting it to stop because they were losing their houses and stuff. But then flip it around, and now they're no longer in power, more or less, I guess you could say. And those laws are going to be, or are being used against them, you know. And again, it all boils back down to the same problem, which is people having this power over you in the first place, you know. So,
Yeah,
you know, really,
it's well, they feel that, like, by promoting limited government, that then they can allow people to enforce you know, the you know, defenses against corruption and whatnot. And it's, they feel like even like if you just allow a little bit of power, because I don't know, there's this disconnect that happens, like when you explain to them, it's like, listen, you know, people are like, because they like to tell us anarchists, they're like, you know, you can't have anarchy because people are flawed. And you just got to go like, well, but yeah, but then if you have government to control them and it's made of people, then they're going to use it in their flawed way. And you point out that this has happened with the Constitution, and they will simultaneously tell you that this is true and not true. They will tell you, no, the Constitution isn't powerless to stop corruption, and it is not just a piece of paper that people can ignore. But also, yes, it is true that people have ignored the Constitution.
But they've just been ignoring it. Yeah. Exactly.
It's like, well, you just gave the explanation that I just gave. Like, I told you this would happen, and then you just told me it happened.
This time. It won't happen this time, though. This time we're gonna get it right, and that's when you hit them with the. Well, you sound like you sound like every person that's ever said that this time communism will work right. It's very fucking easy to say, and it's a completely different.
Well, it's just flabbergasting because I've seen I've seen their brains like short circuit and like just lash out angrily, because this is the best bit, right? Is that you just go over and over again and you're like, wait a second, okay, not only does this work in theory, right? Because we're talking about you tell me people are flawed, therefore anarchy can't be allowed to happen. You tell me that the people are flawed and this is the reason why this can't occur, and then you say we need government with people involved, and then I tell you, yes, but those people are also flawed, therefore government is destined to be flawed and also have the added detriment. Like, it's not even just like the anarchy with the flawed people, but it's like concentration of power and the monopoly on force being able to be used by flawed people who are, you told me, are corrupt. Right? And then you point this out to them and you're like, you silly anarchist, all you do is criticize. You don't offer any solutions. And then I go, no, but I have books full of solutions. And you're like, you silly man, you think you could just tell us about your books? And it's like, well, this is what? Wait, what are we even arguing?
In a lot of ways.
What are we even arguing about anymore?
Yeah, well, they asked for the fucking solution. And I'm like, I'm proposing that we don't do that thing. That's the fucking solution. Like, okay, so what's the alternative? And that's the other thing, is they can never wrap their mind around these things, right? They say, okay, well, what's the alternative system to replace this one? And I'm like, well, you're missing the point. That we don't replace it with a fucking system. We don't replace it with a power structure. That's the problem.
We replace it with ideas.
Is the power structure. Yeah. And, people, and it's one of those things that just, it drives me up a fucking wall. And like, it's hard to articulate. I get it. It's hard to make these two. It's hard to put it because they're so fundamentally diametrically opposed, right? Authoritarianism and anarchism are just on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. You can't really reconcile them with each other. They don't work. So it's really hard to explain to somebody who, in the very least, believes that power can be good. And I always have a hard time because they're like, all right, so but here's my ideal politician, here's my ideal government. Okay. Like, first of all, we're getting off to a bad start because you just accused me of a utopic ideology, and now you're telling me this is my ideal perfect system, which we both know will never exist. There is no perfect politician that will ever exist. But on top of that,
yeah. So okay, go ahead. Actually, sorry.
Well, when you're an anti-statist and you're looking at just being anti-authoritarian in general, the I guess principle there is that if it is wrong to for government to oppress me, it's wrong for the government to oppress my enemies also. The fact that despite the fact that I ideologically might not agree with him, they still have human rights, and I don't believe that they should be persecuted by the government and murdered indiscriminately, So you have to, you're going, okay, so you get the right guy in government. First of all, who the fuck is the right guy, and what does that mean to you? Because it means something different to me. But even if you do get the right guy in the government, it's still immoral. Because on the off chance that he does everything right, there's still going to be somebody that doesn't agree with his vision, that doesn't agree with whatever you're trying to do to force them to do, and they deserve to be able to opt out, and under these systems, you can't opt out, and that's wrong.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter if I agree with them. It could be
it's
the
just a
biggest.
simple idea of self-determination,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
that
that's
includes
kind
like
of
a
the
business
hardest
owner's
part.
right to be like racist, and a lot of people don't like to accept not allowing somebody to be in this place of business because of race or gender or whatever the heck it is. And it's like, look, man,
Like,
like I may
don't
not
buy
agree with it
stuff
either.
from him. Don't buy
Exactly.
stuff from him. Like, why does there need to be a government solution to that problem? Okay, the guy's fucking racist. Don't buy stuff from him. Well, his business might not fail like I wanted to because there's other people who are racist that'll buy stuff from him. It's like, okay.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
then
what, you're
we
mad that
just
there's
live.
no punishment, and that's where it really comes from. Is they want punishment. They want a person to be punished for a decision that they feel is wrong, you know. And it's like, I don't know what to fucking tell you, man. You start getting into these, oh, well, we have to punish absolutely everything that somebody does that I don't agree with, and in that case, like, sure, the guy's racist if he's not actually like violating somebody's rights.
Yeah, if
Then
he's
what are you
racist on his own
supposed to
property,
do?
like
If he's just having an opinion that you disagree with, whether or not I find it abhorrent or not, if he's having an opinion that you disagree with, I mean, you really gonna what? You gonna fucking march the cops into his house and arrest him for that? Like, seriously?
very much yes,
Again,
they
what happens when
will.
the shoe's on the other foot? Because the shoe eventually does drop. You don't always stay in power. The fundamental nature of power, I'm paraphrasing, but the fundamental nature of power is that it must always meet a greater power. Like,
Yes, and yeah, it
you're
will
never gonna
always be
stay in
leveraged
power.
and used by others, and it always
Yeah.
shifts with the times. And this is
And
our gripe with conservatives, is that they think that, well, listen, if I just enact the correct system, then everything else will be done correctly, and as long as people abide by the system, then it can be done. And it's like, well, you can't get people all to do that, because as soon as you create this concentration of power, people will want to leverage it for their own needs, and there's no way to guarantee that this doesn't happen, because when people well, one, they're not going to advertise that fact to everybody else who elects them, and two, even if it wasn't their intention initially, once they get there, the whole machine works to grind everybody into that mindset. And the people who win the most and the people who are able to benefit the most are going to be the ones who leverage that opportunity for themselves.
exactly.
And
And
so,
that's, I've tried to talk to people about this before, and some people are more receptive than others. They understand that the principle is sound, right, and that it's that I think probably the biggest criticism that I get about this kind of stuff is that it's principled, but it's not realistic because you live in the real world, and so you have to. I'm like, listen, maybe the fucking problem is that people aren't principled enough about this kind of stuff. Like, maybe that is the fucking problem, is that everybody's got this excuse that, oh, it's not realistic, so we can't do it. Like, nobody's really willing to like risk anything in order to live by their principles. So, maybe that's part of the problem. And I understand that, it's complicated. It is. People are complicated, especially when there's a shitload of them. Um, Things just become wildly more complicated the more people there are, because I mean, of course it does. Um, but I think, let's see, what were we? Oh, yeah. So the example that I was given was the trolley problem, which drives me up a fucking wall. I hate the trolley problem with a passion because it's overly simplistic on one hand, and on the other hand, it's also extremely the problem is glaringly obvious. Like the issue with the trolley problem, right? I think everybody knows the trolley problem. There's enough memes about it.
right.
Is you have a trolley. There's a set of tracks going one way, there's a set of tracks going the other, and there's whatever, three people on one. There's a lot of different variations, but the gist is that no matter which direction you pull the handle, somebody gets run over by the fucking trolley.
Right.
And democracy is basically just deciding whether one person gets run over or five people get run over, which, if you're going by a simple numbers equation and not thinking about anything else, obviously you're going to have to pull that fucking handle and kill the one guy. right? And that's the moral choice, because you're only killing one person as opposed to 5. You're getting a net good out of this, I guess, because only one person dies. Okay, so here's my problem with the trolley, the trolley issue. First of all, it's horrible at describing like the actual choice, because it doesn't get into why are there people on the tracks in the first place? Who's fucking putting them there? Who's making you pull the fucking handle in the first place? And if the system is the trolley and the tracks, then who's fucking building those? And what happens when you run out of people that are strangers and you have to start pulling the handle on people that you care about? Because that's inevitable, right? You pull the handle enough times, it's going to get down to a choice where it's somebody you care about on one side and it's somebody that you care about on the other. And now I don't think anybody can claim it's a moral choice anymore, because you're having to literally say, okay, who do I care about more, this person or this person? You're having to pull the handle on somebody that you care about. And if that's supposed to be an accurate description of democracy, then fine. But I don't think it's the fucking argument they think it is. I really don't.
Well, so one
And it's
aspect,
like,
so one aspect that I think a lot of people overlook in the trolley problem, or that I think that kind of is the interesting bit of the conversation, is how much culpability in the deaths do you have if you let the train go versus pull the lever yourself, right?
I mean,
And
I
so,
would say objectively, if you pull the lever yourself, it doesn't matter who dies, you're culpable for that now. You've put yourself into it and you've decided to kill them.
right, it was, so that's why, and so the way that it goes is usually that there are more people on the side of the tracks where you don't do anything, right? So like the train is barreling towards 4 people, and you can pull the lever and redirect the train to hit one person instead. And so then the question, that people ask is that if you are present to watch it happen, you were aware of the consequences of both choices, and you decide not to act and allow the train to hit the 4 people, is that the same as being culpable for pulling the lever and saving 3 people? Because one person dies versus 4. And so this is the aspect that a lot of people, I think, either just don't discuss properly, or they don't understand that this is what's actually the driving point of the thought experiment. And they think just on like the morality of saving one person, or allowing one person to die versus allowing four people to die. And it's really not, that's what it is that you're allowing people to die for a situation that you are not responsible for, or you are actively contributing towards the death of one person, or would because you are responsible for that because your actions are involved with causing their death.
Exactly. And that's what drives me up a wall about the trolley problem, is because, yeah, again, they focus on the morality, and I'm like, okay, so what happens if there's no trolley? Like, why does there need to be a trolley? Who's forcing you to pull the lever? Like, these are questions you need to ask. And, when it comes to anti-status and people like us, we're saying, hey, there shouldn't be this. There shouldn't be people on the tracks. There shouldn't be a fucking trolley in the first place running people over. You shouldn't be forced to make that decision or feel like you're culpable if you don't.
Yeah, so like
Like that-
the analogy to voting, I think, would be something like it's like you're not even just thrust upon this trolley situation, is that you understand that the trolley situation is happening, but you walk over to choose a vote of who dies, right? And so it's like you have the option to protest the entire fucking situation, right? And you can either protest the situation and say that this should not be happening at all, or you can walk up and make a choice yourself. And you're like, well, I gotta walk up and make a choice because it's gonna happen either way, and I better just go and try to make the correct choice. But then it's like this added layer of fog where it's like, okay, not only do you know this situation is happening, you know that there's a decision, a vote going on, but you don't even fully get to see the results, or like the results aren't even guaranteed to match up with the way that you threw your vote, right?
You pull the lever, and thinking you're killing one guy, and you don't know that there's 30 other dudes down the track where you can't fucking see them, but you get to go home with this feeling
And
that you saved democracy.
And then next year,
right?
I tell you the fact that your vote is not only contributing to this one guy, but also a bunch of other people who have no business dying either. I tell you that this happened last year, or 4 years ago, the last election year, and that this time, like, you shouldn't vote for these fucking scumbags because this is what they're gonna do regardless of this. And then we have 20 years of this happening, and you still continue to just fucking ignore the fact that this part of the corruption is endemic in the system, and you can't separate the two, and you can't ignore, like, you shouldn't be ignoring that it's fucking going on. And yeah, so that's what fucking conservatives are just as idiotic as prog liberals, and they need to be reformed from their ways.
I mean, I hate to say it, but I think that eventually they might, just by being consistently shit all over by the system. Like and it's gonna get bad. It's gonna get bad.
Yeah, there's gonna be plenty of times where we can do the are you winning conservatives.
Well, not to be a fucking doomer, but with the way things are going, the rhetoric that's being said, it's getting more and more like spooky towards the ends of, all right, they're really going to start black bagging people, because you got Joe Biden. The speech alone is just wild, and we already went over that. But like,
coupled
seeing
with the
the speech is
expansion of the
one thing.
IRS.
The expansion of the IRS, the ideological purge of the military is incredible.
And the fact that we already have precedent of IRS being weaponized against political opponents, and nothing fucking happened.
Yes. And so, again, it's like, I can't give you a timeline. I don't know, but just looking at the way things are going, there's going to be some squeezing and some cracking down very soon, especially if the midterms don't go the way they want them to. Still, probably if the midterms do, it's going to happen either way. I really do, because if they win, there's going to be a lot of resistance to that, and that's going to give them an excuse to crack down. And if they lose, it's going to be like, them basically trying to scrabble to hold on to whatever they can. So either way, I don't think it's going to be good. I really don't. It's not a good time to be an ideological opponent of the state. It's just not. And it's also not a good time to be an ideological opponent of people that are in charge right now, because they are cooking with gas, and it's gonna get bad.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. And so yeah, with that, I think
sorry to drop it on a
no,
slightly
that's
depressing note.
We're talking about 9/11, so there's not going to be
Well, not
happy,
depressing.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be depressing. I shouldn't say depressing. Just knowing that there are people out there that are paying attention to this kind of stuff and are talking about it and are spreading it. Like, this is how you combat something like this, is by individuals educating themselves. Like, this is it. This is the only way you do it. Like, yeah, you could, the big extravagant. Everybody wants to do the big extravagant, shoot all the politicians and shit like that. And that's great and all, but the problem is there's just more people that are going to fill in their spots. Or they're going to use it as justification to squeeze everybody even harder and crack down. So, it's like, just the fact that there are people that are even talking about this kind of stuff and understanding this kind of stuff and educating themselves should at least give people a little bit of hope, because this is how you pull yourself out of something like this, is by individuals choosing to educate themselves and then step back from this system.
Yeah, I'm somewhat like in the long term white pilled in that I think that these principles that we espouse and that we push towards people are intuitively fair,
and it wins out in the end.
Yeah, they're intuitively fair and just. And when you tell people something like, listen, I believe in every individual's right to go about their life in peace and to only be allowed to interact with others on a voluntary basis, and that any of that can be legitimate, and it is not my business what the fuck goes on with other people, and it is not their business what goes on with me, as long as we are peaceful with each other and interact voluntarily. And it's like, well, what the fuck, you can't, this is an intuitively just principle. And when people try to insert a bunch of exceptions and, kind of, oh, well, what happens if this unfair thing happens? And it's like, listen, you just got to accept that sometimes unfair in terms of like things that don't go your way, are going to happen because they belong to other people who, have their own agendas and their own ideas. But as long as they're not forcing it upon you and they're only, conducting their business with their own stuff, then we just have to let them do that, and we don't have to like everybody in the world, and we don't have to be cool with everybody in the world, as long as we are interacting peacefully with one another. And I think this is something that a lot of people can get behind, and so they have trouble wrapping their heads around the extremities of the how people can disagree with each other without forcing their opinions and ideas upon one another. And if you just explain the systems that could be involved in helping this along, like because they think that anarchy means no law and no enforcement of any cultural norms or anything like that. And it's just, the fact is that these things like law and private enforcement of like the peace in various places where you go and interact with, it can all be done privately and voluntarily. And so yes, we won't have the government, but that doesn't mean that like courts will cease to exist, and that like people won't respond to violent occurrences within areas, and that we won't have emergency services or people to build roads and stuff. It's just that all this stuff can be done privately, and a lot of people don't even know about because the thing is, what we have in terms of solutions is thought experiments about how things could go. And that's the thing that the conservatives also don't understand, is that they say, oh, well, you don't have any solutions, you just have criticisms. And they've missed the fact that part of the criticism is that I don't have all the solutions, and I don't presume to be able to solve everybody else's problem, and that people are good at solving their own problems better than me solving their problems. And so you're asking me to solve a problem that I'm telling you is inherently unsolvable by central planning. And
yeah, they're asking you to develop a new system to replace the one. You're like, listen, no. I'm not saying like you're again, they're expecting an outside force to come in and just fix the problem, instead of understanding that what we're advocating for is where people solve their own problems, because people ultimately also know the best how to solve their own problems, because they're the ones fucking experiencing them. They're the ones that are okay, so what am I comfortable with doing in order to solve this problem? How do I want it solved? What do I need? People are good at figuring out what they need for the most part. They don't need somebody to tell them.
yeah, and it's just silly to ask the anarchists what how they would centrally plan something, when the whole point is that we decentralize
Sense of central
and
planning
don't.
in the first place.
So
Yeah.
but I think again that it is something that is intuitively justifiable and just, and it makes sense to people if you just sit down and fucking talk about it for a bit. And so there's going to be more and more, especially on the whole free marketer side of things. There's going to be more conversion over to that, I think, and these boomers and coomers are going to go by the way of the dodo.
I mean, they're unfortunately, yeah, with the way things are going, like, yeah, they're that's really their only option, because like they're not gonna last trying to get this system to work for them. It's just not gonna happen. It's gonna chew them up.
Yeah. All right. And so with that, I think we should call it a day. Gotta wake up early, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's yeah, pretty. I mean, I'll be all right. I gotta get up at like 6, but honestly, 6 hours is pretty good for me. So
Yeah, that's a decent night of sleep for me.
yeah, I don't have to work all day yesterday or tomorrow too, so that kind of helps out,
Sweet. All right, man. Well, yeah, we'll leave it at that, and we will be back next week with some more shit to talk about, depending on what goes on this week. But you know, stuff is always happening. Stuff happens every day.
It really, really does.
All right, man. Goodbye, folks. If you guys are still here, Jedi Jenny, thanks for stopping by. And yeah, go ahead and say goodbye.